Hey guys, Jack's, your free auto mechanic. Today we're looking at our 2006 Chevy Silverado. The issue I'm having is whenever I'm stopping, I'm starting to hear some grinding noises. So the best way to figure out what's going on with it is to get the wheels off of it and get your eyes on it. So let's do just that. And once you've got your wheel off of it, just take a look. See what you can see. You know, is your surface ground up? It looks okay here. Check the inside, and almost immediately I see some metal shavings on top here, quite a bit. So I'm guessing there's something going on the back side here. Yep, this is our problem side for sure. So we've definitely got some issues going on here, and it's difficult on these to be able to tell if you have any brake pad left or not. And you really can't even see in there to tell. Not really an inspection hole or anything, so the best course is to just go ahead and we'll remove some bolts, take the caliper off, see what's going on. Now I'll give you one tip before you get started taking the bolts loose. Spin your steering wheel to the right and it'll save you a little bit of grief. So we get our 19mm, break our bolts loose. Now, I'm going to show you a trick that I do that you don't have to. But what I like to do is stick a pry bar in here and just compress the caliper pistons before I take the caliper off. Something else I'll show you is your brake system, a sealed unit, so you can pretty much gauge the wear on your brakes just by watching your fluid level. See it in there? My purpose for being up here wasn't to show you that exactly, but to remind you that if you are going to compress your caliper pistons, take the cap off. The fluid comes up a whole lot easier whenever you have the cap off. You go start pressing on that caliper to compress it in, and you're going to have a whole lot of fluid trying to come right back at you. And now we can move back down here and put our pry bar in here. It doesn't take a whole lot of pressure. Just give it time. Allow it to compress on its own. You can see, yeah, come right up off of there. And I like to just set it right here on the control arm. Other mechanics like to wire tie through here and hang it somewhere, or they'll put a strap on there and hang it up top. Just as long as you don't have tension on your caliper hose, that's what you're looking at trying to avoid, because you don't want any added stress on that rubber hose, because it will crack and break eventually. So back to what we're looking at. Our brake pads, looks like our outer pad looks just fine. Our inner pad is pretty much gone. So looks like it's time for some brake pads and pretty much some rotors too. So we'll go ahead, we'll take our caliper bracket off of here. There's just 2 bolts. Looks like they're 18 millimeter. You might not want to do that with unwarranted tools. They've got a pretty good warranty program on these. See? So they do break. So like I said, unless you've got a good warranty, good example, huh? Fortunately, I got extras. I know what you're thinking. Is he really going to snap and break another one? No, I'm not going to take the risk. Probably shouldn't have used it that way to begin with. But breaker bar, that's specifically what it's designed for. And you might wonder why it's so hard to get these particular bolts out. And it's because they're Loctited from the factory. And if the mechanic that worked on it last put them back in correctly, they put Loctite back on those bolts before they installed them. So it's normal for it to be a little difficult to get it out. Slides right off. One thing in particular you want to pay attention to is that these are able to move. You can see this one's kind of frozen. Doesn't want to move very good at all. And it's probably one of the causes that resulted in our brake pad being disintegrated on one side and not the other. Similar to a sticking caliper, which I made a video about and showed when it happened on the other side. So now we've gotten to the point where our rotors are being damaged. So we've got the old rotor off, we've got our new rotors, but there's a little bit of prep work that I like to do, and I want to specifically talk about this surface here. Rust can build up on this surface just as easy as anywhere else, and it can cause the rotor to shift, and that can give you a pulsing feeling. So while we've got it off, I'm just going to take a little wire brush that I have. If you've got air tools and you got a little zip wheel or something you can get in there, whatever works for you, it's good to at least inspect it at the very least. But I like to brush it off real good. I like to get right into the corners. That's going to ensure a real good fit of the new part. And we don't want to have to go back over and do this again in about 30 minutes whenever we put it back together. So now we've done our prep work on our hub bearing. That looks good. Now we need to do some prep work on our caliper bracket. If your brake pads came with new clips, that's great. It's a good idea to use them. They even yell at you in the instructions here. It is critical that these hardware clips be replaced when installing the new disc brake pads. So that's how important it is. I think it's a good idea if it comes with new clips. If the new pads didn't come with new clips, then I'm not sure what you're going to do other than you could just clean them up. So if you got new clips, you want to go ahead and take them out. You can just squeeze these together and that'll loosen up the retaining tabs. And then I like to take my wire brush and clean the slots out where the clips are going to go so that they're going to be on a nice flat level surface. You can see a lot of rust was built up on there. That probably attributed to the brake pads not being able to move as well as this being partially frozen, which we'll work on this next. But you want to get these cleaned up as best you can, and if you can get it onto a wire wheel, go ahead. Good idea is to lubricate these slides, but it's also a good idea to clean them. And you can see the coloration of it. So they do come fairly clean, but what you want to do is get some good lubricant. If you want to get some, I'll put a link down below. And you want to put that lube, just put it right on the slide, and then you're going to install it back in. But I'm going to do a better job of cleaning this stuff up. And this particular one, if yours is frozen, I've seen it before, about the only thing you can do is just apply a lot of heat right here and hope that it works itself out. Other than that, you're just going to have to buy a new one. But you can see how stiff this is, and you can see the rubber's coming apart, and all the lubricant that was in there is dried up and not doing its job. So I'll spray inside of here with some solvent, help it clean itself out, and I'll clean this up on a wire wheel. I don't know how well you can see those, but you want to get as much rust off of there as you can. You can see that it gets kind of pitted. But not a whole lot you can do about it other than just try and grind it down. So now that I've got the slide cleaned up, I'm going to go ahead and try and clean out that bore. What I'm using is just brake clean. This is just some I've had. I don't even know if that you can purchase it anymore. I'm just spraying it in there to help saturate and clean stuff out. Let it soak a little bit. And I'm just going to let it set in there. So while we were waiting, I went ahead and cleaned up my slide bolts. And what you want to do is just take one of them, stick them in there, and that's going to push almost all of the dirt and debris out of there, because there's not a whole lot of space for it to go. So that's going to end up working pretty good for us. We want to wash the rest of that out. So it's nice and clean. Worked pretty good. Remember to lubricate. And you know, since I'm here, I'm doing it, I think I'm going to go ahead and clean the other side out too. I mean, that's pretty dirty grease. Might as well. So now we've got both of our slide holes cleaned out to where we can use them. I'm noticing that there's some big chunks of rust. They look like they might just flake off. And there's no sense in putting this back on there knowing that those could just flake off, get right in between your brake pads and your rotors, and you're right back where you started. So I'm going to take a couple extra minutes and take a screwdriver and take these chunks off and get it cleaned up before I put it back on. I did get it cleaned up pretty good, and before I go any further, I'm just going to shoot a thin coat of Rust-Oleum on there, just to help keep it from rusting. Now that I've let my paint dry, we can put our pins back in. Want to make sure you get it coated evenly. Next thing we need to do is put our replacement clips on there. Centered up pretty good, and these will help with that. Now it's all prepped, ready to be installed. And then you realize that the rotors you got won't work on this vehicle. Ain't that something? So, the rotors I had purchased, I didn't look at close enough when they arrived. So those aren't going to work for me. So in this case, I want to drive this thing because it's blocking everything that I need to get in and out of. I can't get my Bobcat out or my equipment out or in and out. So there's a lot of meat left on this thing. I don't generally do it, but I'm just going to clean this surface up. And I'm going to put it back on there. Like I had mentioned earlier, you want to get some sort of Loctite to put on the bolts. Alright, so we're using the old rotor. Some people are curious, or might be curious, well, the rotor was damaged, you were going to replace it. Yeah, I was going to replace it. Do you have to replace it? No, you don't have to. There's a potential that it may make some noise, but probably within the first 1,000 miles, usually within the first 20 miles, the brake pads will wear into the grooves and you won't hear it anymore. But the major reason would be, if they're too thin, would be to replace these. Typically your truck rotors are made a little bit thicker. You can take a micrometer and check how thick they are, go by the specs. You don't have to. I'm just going to put the pads on there and I'm going to drive it. I'll let you know if there's any vibration going on or not. Now if you had a whole lot of pedal vibration or your rotors were warped, then you're going to need to replace your rotors anyway. It's not going to fix it by just replacing the pads. The only way to fix that is the rotor. Fortunately, we didn't have that going on, so putting the pads on should work for us. So what's the next step? We want to put the pads on, and where we had these clips put in, we're going to put some lubricant. That's going to allow the pads to slide easier. Now you can use the lubricant that I showed you earlier that you put on your slides. That's good enough to work in this situation. Or if you have some of this really good purple stuff, this stuff works pretty good. You can use it there as well. And if your pads do not come already coated, then this is the stuff that you want to put on the back of it to eliminate noise. It'll help hold it in place. These particular set of pads came with it already on there, so all I have to do is peel this off and put it on. So like I said, you could use either lubricant, and I'll put a link to both down below in the description. I'm just going to use this green because I've been using it already on this project. You don't have to put a lot, just put a little bit. And it's just going to provide a nice surface for the brake pads to be able to move on. And if we recall, part of the issues we were having were because the pads weren't able to move either on here or on the pins. So that already shows us how important the lubrication on these brake parts is going to be. So you don't want to scrimp. Get something that's good. Next step, we're going to remove the adhesive. You see there's just a thin coating. So if you're using the other lubricant, if your pads didn't come with it, then you don't have to put a whole lot, just a thin coating. Do the same thing with the other pad. This one's wanting to be a little more stubborn. Now this is something I wanted you to be able to see. See, the two pads are made different. This one's got a part that sticks down a little further. But you have to push these tabs in with the pad when you're putting them in. So you might feel like you gotta put some pressure on them. So the pad doesn't want to go in. It wants to push against this clip and shove it into the rotor. So that's not going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it to the grinder and I'm going to grind just a little bit off the end of one side. You can take a little bit off both if you need to, but I should just be able to take just a little bit off, and it might just be that there's too much paint or the material's just a little bit different. And even when they're originally manufactured, they're designed for a whole lot of different applications, so it may or may not fit just right. So just grind a little bit off there and it should take care of it. And now that I've got it ground down enough, it'll slide right in position. And that's what you need to know, is that the pads can move freely. What we're looking for is to be able to just grind off just enough so that it'll slide in there with ease. You shouldn't have to force it in there. So now we know it can move back and forth. Next, we're going to want to make sure that our calipers, pistons, are compressed completely in before we try and put them on there, because they're not going to fit. As you know, you just added an extra inch worth of material in between. So to do that, we're going to need two things. Alright, first, You're going to need your old brake pad. Throw that in there. Next, you're going to need a C-clamp or one of these tools. I'll put a link to one of these below if you're interested in picking one of these up. I can't remember what they call it off the top of my head. Brake pad spreader, maybe, I don't know. I'll put a link down below. But you just set it in there, pull the trigger, and you'll see it's compressing. Now, if you didn't recall earlier, I reminded you to make sure that you had your cap off of your brake fluid reservoir. If you didn't already, now would be a good time, or you're going to spend a long time trying to get these pistons to compress. Now, they do offer one of these that works on both, with dual piston or a single piston. You see I'm just using this, and I'll just move it back and forth till I get them compressed fully. That tool makes pretty quick of that. So now all we got to do is place this back on, and if you wanted to clean it up, you can. But there's no other reason other than visualization at this point. Something I will want you to look out for is that you don't twist your rubber hose. You want to make sure your slides are moved in. We're ready for our bolts. Well, it looks like these are a 19. Our socket's at 18. Nope, both 19s. Alright, so you got your calipers back on, got everything tightened up. If this is your last side, or you're only doing one side, make sure you pump up the brake pedal at this point. If not, move on to the next side. But make sure that you pump up your brakes. Now, I did want to mention, come with me, as I showed before, the level of the brake fluid, you can see that it's come up from below there to here just from doing one side of the brakes. So once we do the other side, it should come up to this side here, about that high. But we'll check it when we get done doing the other side. So on this side, since we already know that we're just going to be changing the pads, all I want you to do is remove the lower bolt and lift up. Pretty handy. One bolt, lift up. Looks like we got just about all the wear out of these set of pads that we were going to get. So on this side, we're just going to remove our clips. We're going to clean these up. Put our new clips in, lubricate it, compress our piston, put our new pads on, be ready to test. So I did have to grind a little off of this one as well. I'll do the same thing with this caliper. Now we just got to throw our wheels on it and give it a test. I did want you to see the fluid level. Hoping you can see it. You could almost put a mark right there and watch this level go down and know whenever you need to put brake pads on. Not bad. But you shouldn't ever have to add brake fluid to your reservoir. It's a completely sealed unit. The fluid level will go down as your pads wear, and as you can see, it comes back up as you replace the pads. Next thing we want to do is straighten the wheel, and you can start the engine to do that. It's not going to hurt anything. To get your wheel straight, but I will say this: pump up your brake pedal. Pump up your brake pedal. I said it twice. Once you get back in the vehicle to test drive it, if you was to try and put it in gear, you wouldn't have much of a brake to stop you. So now all we got to do is put our wheel back on there, clean up our mess, and give it a test drive. Make sure you put your cap back on. Make sure you tighten all your lug nuts. So we got her out on the road. Give her a nice test drive. Go ahead and see how she stops. And overall, pretty good. No noise, no squeaks, No vibration in the steering wheel, no vibration in the brake pedal. I think we're solid. Hey, thanks for watching.